And good evening, everyone. It's Richard with In Service of Christ, and we're here with another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that actually comes up quite a bit, and I imagine it has come up in most of our listeners' lives. I know it's certainly come up in my life and in the life of our my partner in this, Nelson Bob. Nelson, um, you probably had this come up where uh, people have you've had the dilemma of making a decision when to extend help, whether it's monetary or otherwise, and when to maybe pull back. And that's kind of going to be our topic for tonight. Nelson?
Okay, so I'm going to start off by saying that I'm not 100% sure I made the right decision in all of these, especially um, when to not give, with the times I've decided not to help somebody out. But uh, I think my decisions are at least understandable, and I'm fairly decently confident I made the right decision. So, first, I'm going to talk about a time where I was right to give. So, I met this bishop in Africa through another guy I met online. I met the bishop as well, and we talked a bit. And when we first talked, he mentioned some sort of financial support I could give him, but I told him, look, I'm sorry, I really can't help you now, and because back then I was like really living paycheck to paycheck, even a little bit less. Just didn't really have a surplus, and he dropped it, and we talked as friends. We developed a pretty good relationship. We enjoyed talking with each other, and later he asked me for some help, some more help. He said, "Hey, like, look, sorry, I travel around a lot for my ministry, being a bishop, and seeing all the churches under me, and I would like a little bit of help for public transportation, for money for public transportation to get around. I'm really at the bottom of the barrel right now for funds." And I said, well, okay. And I felt that at that time I really needed to help him. I needed to have some faith in God and help him out. And I did. And then he asked, I've been meaning to ask you, could you help me out with the Ministry of Transportation regularly with $80 to $100 a month? And I thought, oh man, I really can't. I'd just be barely scraping by if I did that, even more so than I am now. And I told him, look, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And he said, that's okay. I'm glad we can be open and honest with each other. And I thought, well, that's a relief. So we can still be friends, even though I can't help him as much as I like. Now, here's the thing: that was on a Friday, and now the following Monday or Tuesday or something, I found out I had gotten the job that I was really looking forward to. And with that job, I was going to have a much larger surplus. Um, and so I told him that I was going to be able to help him with putting his daughter through higher education there, because now I could have the funds. And it was going to be, I was going to be a little bit of a pinch, but I could take it. And so that's a situation where I found that I'm pretty sure I was right to make the decision to help him there. And
May
we're
I?
still friends to this day. Oh yeah, go on.
Yeah, may I ask, Nelson?
Yes.
Okay, the bishop had asked you once and then had come back and asked you a second time.
Yeah.
And at the second time, you had considered the bishop's request and decided to go ahead and move forward and try to help him.
Yes.
One question I would have: was there any change, or was there anything maybe stronger in the bishop's request that caused you to go ahead and step forward then?
Not. Oh, maybe just a little bit, because I think he made it just ever so slightly more clear that he was really in a more desperate situation than he normally was. Um,
So
and
perhaps he shared a little bit more
Just a
of
little bit
himself.
more. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we had already become like, this was a few months later after we had first met, and we had already developed a really good relationship. And I almost forgot to add that I had vetted him. I had made sure that he was who he said he was. And he gave me his name, and I looked up the jurisdiction or the church he was with, and I said, "Yep, there he was on the website." I'm not always the best at like facial recognition and matching faces, but he looked similar enough, um, and I thought, well, either a scammer is trying to impersonate a bishop from a really small denomination, or this is the guy. This is the real guy. And I thought, yeah, it's much more likely that this is the real guy. A scammer is probably going to go for like a much higher target, you know.
Yeah.
And I continued to do that when the guy told me he had joined another denomination. I went on their website, and yeah, that was confirmed. I even went on his friends list, and there were other men of the cloth on there, and I went, and one of them had a website that they did solar with. They had some ministry where they went to Kenya, where this guy was from Kenya, and they said, and I found their website. They said, "Oh, we had a great time working with this bishop and helping him and his community get solar." And I thought, okay, if this guy on Facebook is friends with that guy, that pretty much all checks out. He is who he says he is.
So his initial requests were based more towards providing some type of support for his ministry.
Yes.
A subsequent request, if I understood correctly, was where he had now switched up just a little bit and was asking for something more personal.
Well, no, it was still connected with his ministry because he has to travel to all the different congregations under his authority as a bishop. Because he has, I don't know how many congregations he has, but he has quite a few spread out over a relatively large area. And so he would have to pay to travel there. He didn't have a car or a motorcycle. It'd be like taking the bus and the train, and that costs money. So, yeah, it was still for his ministry. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned, I believe, that you are still friends with him to this day?
Yeah, I'm still friends with him to this day. I sent him an email at my lunch break.
On your lunch break today?
Yeah, on my lunch break today, I sent him an... Oh, actually, it was during breakfast, but...
Okay.
Same difference.
Okay.
Same idea.
So how long total has this been?
I've known him for 4 years.
4 years. Excellent.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say, judging from what you're saying, that this has really become a good experience for both of you.
Yeah.
As far as you extending help and this individual contacting you and you being able to help them work on their ministry.
Yeah.
and be able to sustain the cost, which a lot of folks don't really understand, is that
Yeah.
there are costs involved with any type of ministry, any type of church, and churches aren't always necessarily just loaded with a lot of money. A lot of times they really do come down to what the minister might have, or individuals such as yourself stepping forward to help them out. Now, have you had any experiences where making a gift you had second thoughts or reservations with?
Yeah, so I remember I sent money to this other guy, and he told me that, like, oh, there was some flooding in his village or something, and I got the idea that he was in a difficult situation. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'll help you out, and I sent him a bit of money, and he thanked me for it, and a little while later he said, oh, thanks to the money, I bought my daughter a dress. And I thought, I mean, that's great, I'm happy for your daughter, but I was sort of under the impression that your village was flooded and that you needed that, and because of that, you needed some money for some sort of disaster relief. And it was around that time, actually, it was a little bit after that, I changed my phone number because I got a new phone and I wanted the new area code for the area I was with, so the app I was contacting him on, I didn't even install it on my new phone, so I'm now out of touch with him. And so, I mean, we were friendly with each other, but I didn't really have as close a friendship as him as I did with the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we just didn't click as much. And that's not to say that you shouldn't, like, help people out who you don't really click, who you don't have the strongest friendship with, that you should only give to people who you're really close with. I'm not saying that, but that was definitely a factor in it. But more so was that the I felt a little bit misled, and maybe there was a bit of a language barrier. I think that could have been part of it too. But I was also getting to the point where I thought I can't support like a whole bunch of different people.
Okay.
I kind of gotta like pick.
So then you, from these two experiences, and I imagine others,
Yeah, there was another guy too.
that you've been able to establish in your own mind maybe a set of criteria.
Yeah, I was gonna say like, for one, it's best not to give money online to people you meet online, especially if you're kind of inexperienced or you're a little trusting. It's just best not to, but sometimes you just kind of find yourself in a situation like that. Um, well, I would say for one, to avoid that, you don't have to answer any random messages you get on Messenger just because they're in the same Facebook group you are. Because people might just start asking you for money even though they don't at first.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really want to avoid this situation, don't answer unsolicited Facebook messages, and you should probably be okay. But if you're open to the idea, see if you can vet them. Look at their friends list. Go and see if there's the institutions or organizations they're with have a website. See if that's on there. Think about if the request makes sense or not. There's a bunch of different stuff you could do.
So, for example, the individual who had contacted you looking for funds for due to a flood,
Yeah.
that would be something that I would think you would be able to verify.
Yeah, he sent me pictures of the flood. I don't doubt there was a flood. I think there almost certainly was a flood there, but how much it affected him, I don't really know. Like, maybe he was in the part of town that was okay.
So, or he may have exaggerated
Yeah.
the impact on his ministry and on his church.
Yeah.
Like if, let's say he was in Nigeria, he was in Lagos, Nigeria, and there happened to be a flood in Lagos, Nigeria, people might not realize that Lagos, Nigeria is a huge city
Yeah.
with millions of people, and you can have a flood at one end of town and the other end of town is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So you want to feel like you're making, especially in a situation where, as you had mentioned earlier, in making some of these donations and financial commitments, you had analyzed your budget and you saw as to where it would be kind of tight, that
Yeah.
you maybe were a little bit pinched. So you want to probably establish a set of criteria so that if you are, as a person, suffering a little bit or being a little bit tight or what have you, that you can rest assured that the money that you're sending is being used for what it had been requested for.
Yeah. And I'd like to add a few things to keep in mind on top of that. First and foremost, if you give some money once, don't ever think they're going to stop asking, because that is the kind of relationship you formed where you're going to be helping them out. So it's really, if you have a hard time setting boundaries and saying no to people, you can't just give someone money and expect them to like take it and then go away. And not ask again. That's not going to happen. I know this from like 3 different experiences. Not a single one of them has stopped. Another thing is, don't be surprised if they introduce you to your friends who start to ask you for money. That's happened to me. So you really want to be careful about this, and that's part of the reason why I'm sticking to this one guy, this bishop, because if I start, there's really only so many people I can take on, and the more you start talking with, you know, those people could start bringing in their friends, and then them and them, and then there's really only so much I can do. And sometimes even with my friend, the bishop, there's sometimes where I've told him, like, look, I'm sorry, I can't send all of this to you now. It might take me a few weeks, and then I might not be able to give you everything you're asking. But he's still very gracious about that.
It sounds like the bishop does have maybe a little higher standard of integrity
Yes.
and morals and ethics.
Oh, definitely.
And like you had alluded to, there are those out there who may not have that same level of integrity as the bishop, and but they all seem to sound the same when you're first talking with them, and they want to involve you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they want to involve you into the situation that's happening to them and create a sense of urgency with you that you need to step forward, preferably today, and send money as quickly as possible, usually Western Union, which is very expensive, in order to alleviate their problem. When someone is giving you that scenario, or as I might call it, that pitch, what are some of the things that you have found that you can help to not necessarily turn them away, but make their request more realistic to your situation?
Well, I would say one thing is to keep in mind is that if things are just super, super desperate, like, you know, a lot more people in, like, those poorer countries would have, this person probably would have been gone by now if things were this desperate, because stuff is always coming up. So it's probably, I'm not going to say it isn't urgent and it isn't a serious situation, but it might not be as dire as you think it is. Because you kind of figure out when you help people online that it seems like they're always in a dire situation. And it's like, well, they made it years and years before getting to know you. Like, is it really that if someone doesn't send them money, they're going to die, they're going to starve, they're going to get sick, and lose everything? If someone doesn't send them money, like, if that were really the case, they wouldn't be around anymore for you to talk with. So
right.
I'm not going to say, well, just tell them, figure it out for themselves. But I think one thing I've found that's worked is try to, like, if you are really tight with your finances at the time, but you do want to help them, is to say, like, sorry, I can't send this all at once. I can't send this all now, but I can send you some of what you need. And if they accept it and they say, okay, thank you, that helps. Like, I appreciate your generosity, and they don't give you an attitude, then I think that's a pretty decent sign. But another thing I thought of that I've encountered, and this may very well be like a cultural thing, is like excessive familiarity. In some cultures, you want to be like really, really friendly, and you want to give a lot of praise, and you want to seem really familiar. But in this culture, that comes off a little weird. So that did rub me the wrong way, but again, I might have misinterpreted that. That might have just been like just a cultural thing.
Sure. And getting back to another point you had brought up, you had mentioned that when, in fact, with both of these instances, these individuals had contacted you, and you had stepped back and taken a look at your situation and seen where you may or may not have the funds available without putting yourself into too much of a pinch.
Yeah.
So that to me leads into my next topic, which would be budgeting.
Yes.
That I'm very strong proponent on. Do you budget? Do you have a written budget?
Well, sort of, but I do have a very specific budget that I have in my head, but there's very few factors on it. It's like, okay, well, I pay like $53 a month on my car insurance. I'll pay, my base is $230 a month on gas, but I'll record every time I buy gas. I spend roughly $120 a month on groceries, and about 160 on my tithe. Um,
So then you have it budgeted.
I spend about
And-
$750 a month on basic expenses.
Okay, and part of that is your tithe. I was glad you brought that
Yes.
up. So then the money that you're sharing with these, the bishop and so on and so forth, is that considered part of your tithe?
No.
So then this is an additional fund you've set aside.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, in case the listeners are like perplexed and think about the $750 a month figure, I live off the grid on open land on a house I built a small hut that I built myself. So the land is mine.
Yeah.
There's
And
nothing inside.
and if I can just go ahead and interject, because I've seen where Nelson lives, and he's being far too modest. It is much more than a small hut.
Thank you.
It is a very nice piece of property that he has built in the desert, and it is sunken down somewhat and much cooler than a lot of the other properties that are out there. So kudos to you,
Thank you,
on
sir.
your on your project. And in getting back to the concept of budgeting, so you've got your money set aside for your basic necessities: food, gas, utilities,
My insurance
cell phone,
payments,
insurance, whatever.
yeah.
And then you've got your money set aside for your tithing. And then in addition to that, do you actually budget a little bit of money for these other expenditures?
Well, I typically, late in the past, several weeks, I've been slacking on this, but I will record every extra expense for the month, and I'll, just tabulate them all now and then. And ideally, I've actually a bit behind on this, so now I need to go through and look at all the expenses from where I last did that, and then write them all up again. But I'll see, okay, so let's say I typically make about 1,600-ish a month, and then minus 750, that's about, leaves me what, 850 or so surplus. Okay. And so normally I'll start looking at that, and I'll say, okay, well, let's see, I don't want to spend it all. I want to save a few $100s every month, but let's see where I'm at. If it's the middle of the month and I've let's say I've spent about $300, and then the guy's asking for 200, I'll say, ooh, yeah, I can't really do that right now, and maybe I can give some of it to you now and then a little bit next month. But if it's the middle of the month and I've only spent $150, I can say, yeah, okay, we can do that.
Okay.
You can do that. You don't have to sink into poverty to help people. You don't have to put yourself in a position where you're barely scraping by because you're giving everything you own. Now maybe some people are gonna take that on and they're gonna live a very I would say a very, very frugal lifestyle. So they really do want to give every last penny they have. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but I'm not going to say that you have. You should feel like you have to do that.
Right.
People have a list of people to call if you think
Oh, yes. I was reminded that there are some people, unfortunately, who will ask you for money. And this is the incidents where this has happened have been here in the States rather than someone online. But I'm sure it does apply to people online as well, where they'll ask for money, and if you're not able to respond to their request, they literally will have a list of people that they're going to call. And so they're going to just go to the next person and go to the next person and go to the next person. And this sounds harsh. It's unfortunate, but I personally think in a couple of instances that this has become a learned activity for some individuals to rather than looking at their situation and saying, okay, what can I do to help myself? Maybe I can work a little more. Maybe I can cut back on my expenses. maybe I could actually say no to one of my children or to a family member or a friend who's asking me for money, but instead turning around and taking their situation on. I can't tell my daughter no, I can't tell my son no, so I'm creating this crisis that seems to occur every month and going through this list of people to try to solicit funds from. Um, and that gets back to the psychology. And do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think now the States is a very different story than like real like countries in Africa where like over there it really is a lot harder to make it. There's a lot of factors going in that into play that we don't really understand here. Like my friend and the bishop has told me that because of the tribe he's a member of, it's can be difficult for him to get a job and because people will resent him for being a member of the largest tribe. In fact, one year, it was in the 90s, a member of his tribe won the presidency, and he was living in an area where there were not many people of his tribe, and so some people of other tribes burned his store down because of that. They resented him so much. So that's, I mean, yeah, stuff like that doesn't really happen in this country to that extent. I mean, yeah, of course there's racist employers who won't hire people because of their race, but that's illegal, and you can get away with that to a point, but it's kind of hard to get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're running like an established business, if you're just running like a kind of a mom and pop place, then yeah, but if it's like a major corporation with benefits and stuff, you can't really get away with that. Someone's gonna get you eventually. But with here, yeah, there are so many more opportunities to make it in the United States, but there are people who have developed a sense of learned helplessness. Maybe they lack self-confidence and stuff. But if you have someone like that calling you and you know them well enough and you have the time, maybe you could say, well, look, I can't really send you any money, but let me sit down with you and try to help you figure out a situation, maybe make some cuts somewhere, better utilize some money, figure out how to get a better job. One of the best gifts you can do to someone is teach them a skill.
Teach them a skill. Even if that skill, maybe it's not necessarily a marketable skill to go out and get employment, but maybe it's a skill as far as learning how to live their life better.
Yeah.
Cutting back on expenses, learning how to economize in other ways, living within their means, and that certainly comes from the Bible.
Yeah.
About there's numerous verses. I don't have any coming to my mind right at the moment.
I think
but
there's something in Proverbs about drinking from your own cisterns and stuff, and
yes,
like about relying on your own resources and not putting yourself in a position to be dependent on others.
Right. So
God helps those.
yeah, and God helps those who help
I
themselves.
think that's Benjamin Franklin. Pretty
That-
sure that's Benjamin Franklin.
That could very well be.
Yeah.
So you brought up the bishop, which is a success,
Yeah.
and then you brought up the other individual that you have kind of lost track of,
Yeah.
but that kind of soured you a little bit. Do you have any others?
Yeah, there was another guy who was a friend of a friend, not who I met online, who I met in person, and he said, "Oh, you might want to talk to my friend. He's building his own house too." And I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. He sounds like a sort of person I do want to meet." I talked with him, and he wanted me to send him some money for some materials for his house, and I thought, and from what he just said about the situation, I thought, yeah, from my knowledge about like Adobe and like rains and stuff, and how prone Adobe can be to rains if you don't do it right, I thought, yeah, this sounds like a legitimate need. And so I sent him some money. And then he was asking for money again for like medicine and some extra food, and he just kept on asking. It was just, I got to the point where it wasn't so much the situations he was asking money for. It was that he was asking so much when my other friend who I met him through was already sending him a bunch of money regularly every single month.
Also,
Yeah, and it's like he already has like a support system. Um, and the thing about Adobe is, if you do it right, it's not going to be as susceptible to rain. Like there's numerous things you can do to.
But it's more like he's a user.
Yeah,
If you offer and you say yes, they're just going to keep,
I
instead of trying to help themselves.
I felt like he didn't really know when to stop asking, and then my other friend who I met him through, who had been sending him a lot of help, said like, yeah, that is true. He doesn't really know when to stop asking, even though I've sent him a lot of help. He hasn't always spent it very wisely. And what I said about excessive familiarity, yeah, I thought he was just seemed a little too familiar too soon. It just could very well be a cultural thing.
hey, I like your phrase "learned helplessness."
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of folks out there who have learned helplessness and apply that on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And it's amazing how, to me, it's amazing how there are some people who automatically know when you get paid. How do they know when you get paid? Because they are at your door within a day or so with another crisis, the crisis of the month. And I thought that was kind of interesting. If you had 3 tips you wanted to share with people, what do you think that they would be? Your top 3 tips?
Well, I would say, first of all, don't do what I did and just respond to unsolicited Facebook messages of people you don't know just because they're in the same group as you. Especially when they're from outside the country, because that's pretty good you can have a pretty good idea of where it's going to go from there.
Okay.
So be really careful, and even if it's within the country, there could be people who will not pretend to be someone in need. They'll just try to scam you and get your money some other way, and try to tell you about being a business partner or some sort of Ponzi scheme or pyramid scheme or whatever. So it's best online, with a few exceptions, don't respond to random unsolicited Facebook messages and emails. And if you do that, you are most likely going to avoid having to make these decisions. Because if you want to give, it's really good to give to credible organizations that you can be confident are going to spend the money well, to do the right thing, and they're not going to be trying to make you feel obligated to give, or they're not going to make themselves dependent on you, at least if they're a reputable organization. They won't.
Right.
Yeah.
How, and as far as tips, where would you place having an established budget in a priority sense?
It's a very high priority. I can't rank it exactly.
Okay.
But I would say for your financial well-being in general, even if you're going to be like Ebenezer Scrooge before he got visited by 4 ghosts, actually, because remember there's Jacob Marley, he was a ghost, and then there was the 3 other ghosts. So before Ebenezer Scrooge got visited by 3 ghosts, if you want to be like him, you still got to have a budget, because you still got to know where your money's going so you don't end up sinking into poverty too. You need a budget regardless of whether you're going to be giving. But yeah, when you're going to be giving, you definitely want to be paying attention to the budget.
Got it. All right. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so just want to recap a bit. Again, like, I'm not saying I am absolutely right about everything, but these are just some of my experiences that I think can help some other people. So first of all, try to avoid situations where people online or who you don't know are going to be asking you for money. But if you haven't done that and someone is asking you for money, try to vet them. Try to see if you're forming a natural friendship with them already that doesn't involve money. And can ask yourself if you can afford it. And see how they respond to the times when you can't really give them what they're asking.
Right.
And if you get good results from all of those, then you know what? Don't rule it out. Maybe you can really help someone in need.
Excellent.
But just be very cautious, and it doesn't hurt to ask other people for advice. You're doing yourself a disservice if you only listen to my opinion on this. There's people who could give you much better advice than me.
Well, I think your advice is very well sound.
Oh, thank you.
It comes from your own personal experiences. The fact that you are using a budget is commendable. I'm a strong proponent on having things budgeted and budget every step of the way, and to treat your budget as being a living, fluid thing. You're going to make changes from quarter to quarter, from year to year, maybe even from week to week. You're going to adjust your budget depending on the things that come up. So I'm a strong proponent of budgeting, and if you do budget well and you do live within your means, then you are setting yourself up to take advantage of the opportunities to help and to serve. And that's certainly what we believe as Christians that God has us here for.
Yeah,
And,
I think you have a moral obligation to give.
yes.
Yeah, so you definitely need to be giving, but giving to just random strangers you meet online, well, that is, I didn't say you need to do that. That's a
Right.
different situation there.
And with that, I want to thank everyone for listening. This is Richard with Nelson and with Candy.
God be with
And
you all.
God be with you all. And if we'd certainly love to hear your comments. If you can put your remarks and your ideas, not only about this particular video, but future videos you'd like to see. And certainly, if you have any questions for us, if you think that this video might help someone, maybe someone that has been contacted by someone from overseas, or by someone who is asking for money, and you're concerned about their welfare, reach out to them and go over this video with them and see if maybe some of the ideas and some of Nelson's experiences might be able to help that individual. And with that, I want to thank everyone. Like and subscribe this, and watch out for our next video. Thank you very much.